that? Lights, camera, action, fractions. If it's improper, you have to change it into a mixed number. I'll be the one to explain it. Improper's when the top number was bigger than the bottom. So when you take the bottom, fit it in to the top one. Say that.
Hello and welcome to the Kearney Math Show. Thank you all for tuning in today. On today's episode of the Kearney Math Show, we are going to be featuring Unit 2, the Rational Number System, Mini Lesson 1, in which we talk about fraction and decimal conversions. So before we get started, go ahead and make sure you write your name at the top of your paper, and this is entry number 1. So our learning goals for today, guys, by the end of this video, I want you guys to be able to tell me what is a rational number and how to convert from fractions to decimals and from decimals back to fractions. So before we get started, let's just talk about the keyword rational number. So a rational number is a number that can be written as a fraction where the denominator is not equal to 0, okay? So a rational number is any number that can be taken and written as a fraction. If you can take a number and write it as a fraction, then it is rational. Another example of a rational number is a number that is, it doesn't necessarily just have to be, it has to be written as a fraction, but it also can be in the form of a decimal. But it has to be a specific type of decimal. So another example of a rational number are decimals that are terminating decimals and repeating decimals. So example of rational numbers are fractions and decimals. So the decimals have to be, as I said, terminating or repeating, okay? So when you hear the word terminating decimal, what does that terminating, what's the root word there in terminating? To terminate. And what does it mean to terminate something? To stop. So a terminating decimal are decimals that end, or you can say stop, okay? They're a decimal that eventually ends, and it doesn't just keep going on and on and on and on. Okay? Repeating decimal. What do you think a repeating decimal is? What's the root word there? Repeat. So it's a decimal that has a pattern that repeats. So an example of a terminating decimal would be like 0.25. Okay, an example of a non-terminating decimal might be something that just keeps going on and on and on and doesn't have a pattern. An example of a repeating decimal might be something like 0.252525, and it keeps repeating. How can we show that a pattern keeps repeating? We can put a bar over it. Okay? So, just to recap, a rational number can be written as a fraction where the denominator is not 0, or if it's in the form of a decimal, it has to be a terminating decimal or a repeating decimal. Okay? So, as we work through these rational numbers, our whole unit is about rational numbers. We're going to be looking first at decimals, and then later we're going to be looking at fractions. So before we do that, let's just talk about how to convert between the two. How to convert from a fraction to a decimal and back. So first we're going to start with decimals to fractions. And we're going to need to think back to several years ago when we first talked about place value. So to convert from a decimal to a fraction, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to write the digits after the decimal as the numerator. Okay, so for example, if you have 0.35, you're going to take the digits after the decimal and write it as the numerator. Okay? And then you're going to use, in step 2, you're going to use the place value as the denominator, okay? So we want to come over here, we want to look at this. If we were to read this, 35, and we want to look and see where is that place value. So the 5, if we look up here, we have the 5 here. We look, it's in the hundredths place value. Excuse me. So the 35 would be 35 100ths. So my denominator, use the place value. What place value is that 5 in? It is in the 100ths place value, so that is my denominator. And then the third step is to simplify. So just to give you a quick example, number 1, we have 0.07, so we're going to take the digits after and write it as a numerator. We're going to look and see what place value is that final digit in, and it's in the 100ths place value. So 100 is going to be my denominator, and then we're going to simplify. Can we simplify that? No. So, moving on. Next, we're going to be going the opposite direction. We're going to be going from a fraction to a decimal. So to go from a fraction to a decimal, you're going to, here we are right here. To convert from a fraction to a decimal, you're going to divide the numerator by the denominator. Okay? So for example, if we have number 1, 4/5. Just to show you, this is the numerator. And we're going to divide that by the denominator. So, always that top number is the numerator, that always goes, it's 4 divided by 5. So we're going to say 4 divided by 5. So can 5 go into 4? No, so we're going to put a 0, and then we have to add a decimal and a 0. Can 5 now go into 40? Yeah, so we're going to take out my decimal straight up, shoot it through the roof. And how many times does 5 go into 40? 8 times. And we just check that. 5 times 8 is 40. So 4/5 as a decimal would be 0.8. So we can come up here and write 0.8. Okay? So just to recap, to convert from a fraction to a decimal, you're going to divide the numerator divided by the denominator. Okay, so just like we looked at, you already kind of looked at this last week. When you see something as a fraction, that's meaning you can divide the top number divided by the bottom number. And then my final, if you look over on the right side of your paper, we're converting now from a mixed number to an improper fraction. Okay, so to convert from a mixed number to an improper fraction, we have 4 3/5. Just to remind you, I know many of you already remember this from 6th grade. Just to remind you, you're going to take the denominator, multiply by the whole number. So 5 times 4, and then we're going to add the numerator. So 5 times 4 is 20. 20 plus 3 is 23, and you keep the denominator the same. Okay? So multiply the denominator by the whole number, and then add the numerator. And then if you're going the opposite direction from an improper fraction back to a mixed number, you're going to do exactly like we just said just a minute ago. We're going to divide that numerator by the denominator. So 15 divided by 7. How many times does 7 go into 15? It goes in there twice. So 7 times 2 is 14. 15 minus 14 is 1. So our remainder is 1/7. Okay? And we can check that to see if that's correct by going the opposite direction. Just like we just said, 5 times 2 is 10. Oops, 5 times 7, I wrote that wrong. 2 times 7 is 14, plus 1 is 15 over 7. So, just to recap what we just said, we have talked about how to convert from a fraction to a decimal, which we do that just to go back, just to remind you. We are going to divide the numerator divided by the denominator. To go from a decimal to a fraction, you're going to write the digits after the decimal as the numerator, and the place value is the denominator, and simplify. Okay? So right now, all you had to do was write down the notes, and we are going to answer any questions you have tomorrow in class, and we're going to go over some more practice problems. Okay? So super proud of you guys. Great job. And I will see you all tomorrow in class. Peace out, Rainbow Trout. Love you, mean it.